Let me tell you an incredible story. It's about loneliness, a wild adventure, and, well, one of the most unusual pets you can possibly imagine. This is the true story of a writer named Gavin Maxwell, who, after a pretty tough loss, made a decision that would completely change his life and even make a small, unexpected contribution to science. So, to really get this, you have to picture where he lived. Maxwell was in a place called Camuofirna, way out in the West Highlands of Scotland. I mean, it's stunningly beautiful, but also incredibly remote and isolated. And after his beloved dog, Johnny, died, that isolation really started to feel like a deep, profound loneliness. The idea of getting another dog, well, it was just too painful. But, a life without an animal companion just felt empty. So what do you do? Maxwell's solution was not another dog, and it wasn't a cat. He landed on an idea for a companion that was actually perfect for his watery surroundings, but it was something almost nobody had ever thought of as a pet.
Right, so how does a man in Scotland even start thinking about getting an otter? That brings us to our first part here, a pet like no other. And believe it or not, this whole idea started all the way over in Iraq. It was just this thought that kind of popped into his head. As he put it himself, his home was, and I quote, ringed by water a stone's throw from its door. He figured it would be an eminently suitable spot for this experiment. So you see, it wasn't just some crazy whim. It was actually a thought that made a lot of sense for his unique environment. Now, what's really wild is how this idea went from a daydream to a real possibility. He was on the trip to southern Iraq, and he just casually mentioned this otter idea to a friend. And the friend replies, just as casually, that he should get one from the Tigris marshes, said they were as common as mosquitoes over there, and that the local people often tamed them. And just like that, the experiment had a location. So, the seed was planted, a location was found. But as we're about to see in this next section, the otter arrives. Actually getting the animal, well, that was a whole other story. It was a process filled with these frustrating delays that ended with a very sudden and very, very strange delivery. So Maxwell's in Basra, just waiting for some mail from Europe. But look at this timeline. It was a total comedy of errors. He sends a cable, gets no reply. He books a phone call 24 hours in advance, but the line's out of order. The next day, the exchange is closed for a holiday. The day after that, another breakdown. His friend had to leave, and Maxwell was just stuck there, waiting. 5 days later, his mail finally shows up. He takes it to his bedroom to read, and there, on his floor, are two men. And next to them is this sack that's just squirming and twisting around. They hand him a note from his friend, and all it says is, "Here is your otter." Okay, so he opens the sack, and this quote just brilliantly captures his first impression. The creature that crawls out isn't some cute, sleek little animal. No, it was caked in drying mud that had formed these pointed, symmetrical scales. He said it looked like a tiny dragon straight out of the Middle Ages, with this soft, chocolate-brown fur peeking out from between its mud armor. It took about a month of cleaning before Maxwell could see the otter in his true colors. He named him Mijbil, and here's where the story takes a fascinating turn. Mijbil turned out to be from a race of otters that was previously unknown to science. Zoologists later officially named it Lutrogale perspicillata maxwellia, or more simply, Maxwell's otter. So he wasn't just taming an animal, he was bonding with a creature that literally no one had ever scientifically documented before. So Maxwell now has this little mud dragon, a creature totally new to science, living in his hotel room in Iraq. How in the world do you go from that to a beloved companion? Well, the first 24 hours were not great. Mijbil wasn't mean or hostile, but he wasn't friendly either. He was just completely uninterested in Maxwell, choosing to sleep on the floor as far away from the bed as he could possibly get. But then, on the second night, something shifted. Mijbil came onto the bed, curled up, and fell asleep right in the crook of Maxwell's knees. And that was the turning point. It's such a small act of trust, right? A quiet little decision that starts to bridge the gap between two totally different species. After that moment, his indifference just melted away. And Maxwell very quickly learned the number one defining characteristic of an otter. He took Mijbil to the bathroom, and the little guy went absolutely wild with joy. He spent a solid half hour just plunging, rolling, and shooting up and down the length of the tub, making enough splash for a hippo. It just goes to show you, for an otter, water isn't just for survival, it's a playground, it's pure, unadulterated fun. After that, Mijbil's personality just blossomed.
He was so playful. He'd spend hours just shuffling a rubber ball around the room like a tiny four-footed soccer player. But his real talent was lying on his back and juggling small things, like marbles on his belly without ever dropping one. These weren't just tricks. They were signs of a really sharp, curious mind. Mijbil was a real character.
So the bond was formed, but they were still stuck in Basra. And now came the biggest challenge of all, trying to transport an otter all the way from Iraq back home to Scotland. Let's just say this journey was anything but peaceful.
The logistics were an absolute nightmare. The main British airline to London flat out refused to fly animals, period. So Maxwell had to book a different flight to Paris, but that airline had one very strict rule. Mijbil had to be in a box no bigger than 18 inches square, and it had to stay on the floor at his feet.
About an hour before the flight, Maxwell put Mijbil into this custom-made box just to get him used to it, but when he came back, he found a horrific sight. The box was completely silent. But as you can see in his own words, from the air holes and cracks around the lid, blood had trickled out and dried. He just tore the lid open in a total panic.
Inside, Mijbil was just exhausted and covered in blood. In his terror, he had torn the lining of the box to absolute shreds. Maxwell had to frantically rip out the rest so there were no sharp edges left. By the time he was done, their flight was leaving in 10 minutes, and the airport was 5 miles away. He shoved the miserable little otter back in the box and just raced to the airport, holding the lid down with his hand. So they get on the plane, and a very kind air hostess suggests he can have his pet on his knee. Maxwell's so grateful, but he has no idea what's about to happen. He opens the box. In a flash, Mijbil is out and gone, just disappearing down the aircraft at top speed. And chaos erupts. There are squawks and shrieks everywhere, and one woman actually stands up on her seat, screaming, "A rat! A rat!" While the air hostess is trying to sort out the mess, Maxwell is craning his neck, desperately trying to see where his otter has gone. And then, all of a sudden, he hears this distressed little chitter of recognition from his feed. Mijbil bounded onto his knee and just started to nuzzle his face and his neck, looking for comfort. It's this moment that proves the connection was truly a two-way street. After all that terror, Mijbil's only goal was to find his person. I mean, after all that chaos, the fear, the frantic escape, the otter's very first instinct was to find his human. This whole extraordinary story, from the marshes of Iraq to the skies over Europe, it really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What is it about companionship that makes us endure such incredible challenges for it?